Okay, now we're down to the grand finale of how we ended up with the AR-15/M16 weapon system as our standard military issue rifle. If you watch the other videos and see how I explained the whole process from the adoption of the 30-40 Krag right up until the mid-50s when they adopted the M14 rifle, you see how the process goes on and the different factors. Now, the M14 rifle was adopted in the late 50s, and what the problem is and how this all fits in is that period of time from the late 50s, 60s and that, you had the Cold War, you had a very turbulent time in the United States of America. The country was divided. There was the threat of nuclear war. We almost had with the Cuban Missile Crisis. You know, there was a lot of things going on. It was a very violent time in American history, and there were all kinds of factions heading in different directions in the military, in the government, the civilians, the protests. Racial equality was another huge thing. So all of this was going on and in this turmoil, and then the Cold War, and like I said, the threat of nuclear war, which would basically destroy civilization as we knew it, and we came close to doing that. Well, in this mix and all this insane crap, we have a couple key players involved with this rifle. One is Eugene Stoner, the guy that designed this rifle. Actually, he designed a whole series of firearms. Okay, Eugene Stoner was a weapons engineer. He was an aircraft engineer, actually. And so he got used to working with more modern materials like aluminum. Okay, I believe these stocks are fiberglass or something. He worked with the aircraft industry, and he took his knowledge of those components and turned it into designing firearms, okay, which at the time in the mid-50s was innovative, unheard of, and like something totally out of the box, off the wall, coming at you, okay. And Stoner had a company where I've seen a semi-automatic AR-10 shotgun or AR-9 semi-automatic shotgun with an aluminum receiver in it. And it was some pretty interesting firearms he developed. And so we'll show you how he plays in this whole situation. And then we have Robert Mcnamara. Robert Mcnamara was the Secretary of Defense from 1960. Actually, President Kennedy kind of appointed him until I believe 68 or 69. And what Robert Mcnamara was, he was a college-educated man, was in the service in World War II. And McNamara's deal was, he was, how can you call it, data analyst or whatever. His thing was in the Air Force, he trained officers how to assess bomb damagement, the efficiency of the bombing raids, and all this other stuff to streamline it and make it more effective. That's what his thing, his specialty was. And after the war, him and several of these other officers formed a little company. There were 10 of them. And that's what they did, is they would look at things, analyze it. They used computers, graphs, all this other stuff back in the 40s. Now you say that now and it sounds like, yeah, so what? He's got a graph and a chart. I can do that on my phone. Well, back in 1949, that was out of the box, totally off the wall. See, this is where this guy made a name for himself. And what happened was Ford Motor Company in the 50s was failing. So this company, started by another officer from Texas, Ford Motor Company, which is one of the relatives, either the son or grandson of Henry Ford, hired all 10 of them, brought them in to Ford Motor Company and said, help me straighten the business out. And it was a big thing in Time magazine and that. The group of these men, they were ended up called the Whiz Kids, went in there straightened out Ford Motor Company and made it a successful company again. It got it off of the verge of bankruptcy and going out of business. How they did it is through studying, analyzing the process, the marketing skills, and I mean the whole thing, from manufacturing to what they were selling, to what they were marketing, to what kind of cars people like to buy. Okay, this is all wrapped up in there. And Mcnamara kind of stood out from the crowd and actually became the president of Ford Motor Company at one point in time. He was the first non-family member of the Ford family to hold that position. With this fame and being in Time magazine, that's where President Kennedy put him in as Secretary of Defense. Because, like I said, it was a very turbulent time, a lot of problems, the Cuban Missile Crisis, we're talking the end of civilization, the Cold War's getting out of control, a lot of things going on. So, now those are the two main players in this, and where we are at now in this point in time is the Army went and adopted the M14, very comfortable with it. Souped up M1 Garand, same controls, a lot of improvements, short gas piston, operating system, 20-round detachable box magazine, selective fire. Supposedly the wonder weapon to solve all the military's problems. We just make these, send them out there. Well, during the test trials, that's where Stoner comes in. His Armalite Corporation was trying to push, he had a version in the 7.62 by 51, which was the AR-10, which was basically a bigger version of this. The gun still only weighed 7 pounds, but it shot that larger caliber and all that other fun stuff. He submitted that in the trials. It was rejected because, looking at it, from the way the Army was, there was a faction in the Army that wanted, things their way. That one general forced them all to go with that caliber. The 7.62 by 51 was the new caliber, and that was going to be NATO's caliber, whether they liked it or not. So if you were in NATO, you better have a gun that fires that. And then a lot of the Army was thinking they wanted a war to go and defeat the Russians in Europe and all that other fun crap. They had that mindset. But when you got Mcnamara in there, he realized that what the communists were doing is they were going into these third world countries and subvertently and underhandedly turning them into communist satellites. So we were losing in the Cold War, not so much in a traditional big military, we're going to take on the Red Army, is they were getting all these little loose ends around us, and basically all these small little countries were becoming aligned with the Soviet Union, and they were gaining ground and getting numbers. So the only thing we could do, and that's where the Kennedy administration, under the advisement of Mcnamara, he had a very flexible way of doing things, where a lot of the hardline military guys are straight on, like General Patton, just go in there and get them, okay? Where Mcnamara said, well, if they're doing this subversive stuff to us, we got to learn to fight them back on a level playing field by doing subversive stuff to them. So this is where you bring in the other factor, a little place called Vietnam. The French lost a colony. The country split in two. We supported South Vietnam. And we did it by sending advisors way back into the 50s, the late 50s. We had people in there training the Army, advising, and this and that. It was a pretty bad situation because anytime you support a third world country where they change the government every 3 to 6 months, you're really not going to be on the winning side of anything. But the stage was set. So we got our fingers in Nam back in there about the time they're adopting this gun. So Stoner's pushing his AR-10. They didn't like it. They rejected it. He goes, I got something else in my lineup. And that's where he come up with the AR-15. The AR-15 was even smaller, even lighter, used all the modern technology. His big key was and you can look at it now, the big factor is, look at the price of a baseline AR-15 rifle. If you go to a gun show, let's say it's $400. Look at the baseline price of the lowest cost, simplest, plain M14 style rifle that Springfield Armory makes. You got one gun with a $400 price tag on it, and I think a lot of them are $1,700. Let's just say $1,600 to buy some sort of a real base model of an M14 copy. So this is a huge factor. Okay, also, the AR-15 system, which he was selling, is modular. It's easy to work on these guns. Okay, if something's wrong with this weapon, I can disassemble it with I got a toolbox full of different tools and that, basically punches, wrenches, there's some fixtures and blocks I need to hold the receiver in that. But basically, you know, it's more just wrenches and driving pins and stuff. The way the gun is designed, the barrel units are modular. If something goes wrong with the barrel unit, I'm not going to reset it in the headspace and that. I just go get a replacement barrel and I can unbolt this, put it right the hell back on. Okay? Where if you did that on an M14, you have to go and time up the slots in the barrel, or on an M1 Garand, time that all up. You have to have a short chamber, so that way your headspace is short. And then once you get the barrel timed and in there, which is going to be more difficult than this, because you need you're going to need hydraulic presses, wrenches, all kinds of special tools, and it's easy to screw up, bend, or damage stuff. With this, you just unbolt it, bolt it back on, torque the nut down, line it up, make sure you're okay, and away you go. A lot simpler to work on this gun. And any M14, you'd have to go and hand remount the chamber to get the head spacing right. It's a lot more work to it. A lot more expensive weapon system. This is not. Okay, this was a selling point. Also, they didn't like the AR-10, so he come up and basically it was a copy of the civilian 223, which we now call the 5.56 by 45 millimeter. He went and took this varmint round because doing the ballistics, it just barely made the U.S. Army requirement for lethality. Okay, in other words, for the service rifle, it had to have a cartridge powerful enough or with enough of killing force to be acceptable. And that was right at the bottom. So he went, designed this gun. The ammunition is smaller. The ammunition is lighter. Okay, the gun is lighter. So you can carry more ammo and a lighter gun on a person, taking the physical stress off the soldier, so this is better. It's a modular system. It's easy to repair. You can do it. All you need is a workbench, a vise, and some tools and spare parts. Okay, you can repair these guns. Pretty simple. Not as complicated as needing more or less like a machine shop or to work on something like an M1 Garand or M14. So, he tried selling this gun to the government. They rejected it. They really didn't like it. The hardline military did not like aluminum, fiberglass, all this crazy crap. They didn't like it. And they said when they tested these guns, the Army rigged the test. That was the big controversy. The Army made it so this weapon failed. Okay? And they did it deliberately because they really could not accept the idea of something like this replacing something like the M1 Garand or the M14. Alright, so the other key features on this, and the idea is the velocity. Okay, even though it's a varmint round, yeah, when you shot a woodchuck or a prairie dog with a soft point bullet, a little sucker explodes. But if you take that and put it with a full metal jacket military round, which is specified by the Geneva Convention, this gun had a very strange effect. And this is part of the lore and the legend of the early AR-15, M16 rifles. Somehow when you do that, And another key factor is it's the velocity. Even though it's a 55 grain tiny little bullet compared to a 150 or 168 grain bullet that was the standard then, it's traveling at a much higher velocity. So to sell this and the studies and the science behind it, they went and showed where even a smaller projectile, when you increase the velocity, the damage is much more. Okay, there were tests, demonstrations, and you see a lot of these, they're movies, you'll see them on the History Channel, like an Army soldier. There was one where he took an AR-15, mounted it on a bench, and they had cinder blocks, a cinder block wall. And he put a 20-round magazine on and pulled the trigger and let it fire in full auto, and it disintegrated a 12-inch cinder block and collapsed this little wall down. I believe these films were made to show to the military staff and to the congressmen and convince people to buy these guns. Because back in those days, there was no internet. People didn't make videos like this. You had to make a little movie. So I've seen them old Army films where they show the M16 or a photograph where the guy's got all the guns laid out. This is a rifle that's going to replace this and that. And there were a lot of these films and demonstrations and things trying to sell. They're like advertisements to Congress and to the higher ups in the military that would petition Congress or recommend this on committees or whatever. So a lot of this was going on. So they were pushing, Stoner was pushing this gun, okay? And there were a lot of studies and all the stuff done where this was a superior weapon, this was the future, okay? And this idea was rejected by a lot of the hardline military guys. Well, lo and behold, this gun was rejected. The M14 was going into service. That's what everybody was issued and going on with. All right, so in all of this, we have another famous person, General Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay heard about this gun, heard about the controversy, went over, examined it, seen all the things, and fired it himself. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, around 19 in the early 60s, Curtis LeMay says, I don't care what anyone says, the AR-15 is the rifle that the United States Air Force is going to use, period. And that was it. He ordered 8,000 rifles and a couple million rounds of ammunition. And he said, that's what my people are using. So now this off-the-wall shit by a famous high-ranking general who makes this decision and orders the guns and says, I don't care. My people are using this now. So he puts this order in. So now we go back to this little covert, top-secret crap going on in Vietnam. And this is where the CIA hears about this. And somehow the CIA diverted, and this is true, 1,000 of those 5,000 or 8,000 that LeMay ordered, they somehow got their hands on 1,000 of these rifles, some ammunition, and sent it back over to Vietnam where the advisors were. And they did this top secret little study and wanted to see how this thing worked in the covert thing there, which they did, and the reports come back. Now, the weird thing about it and where it got this mystique is them little high velocity bullets. And I talked to people that were in the service and seen this. On one of these 24-inch barrel rifles, a little 55 grain bullet whistling out of there with a full metal jacket does some weird stuff at close range. When you hit somebody under 50 yards with this full-size rifle, okay, that bullet tears them up bad. That is true. There's something about the early guns and the way they were set up that bullet did some horrific damage, okay? So this is where this mystique that these guns were terror weapons, they would, rip. The guy told me they had an incident at the base where the guy attacked the guards and they shot him at close range, and this thing took his arm clean off, severed it off his body. Of course, the shot was made like at 40 foot or something. So there is some truth to it. I've never seen the effects of this. I've seen the ballistic studies and gelatin and that, but I'm talking about people that actually seen someone shot with one of these. There's some tall tales in there. So now the Special Forces advisors are sending back from Vietnam that this weapon, does this and that, and the reports are good. The CIA likes it. Now the CIA is looking to get more. LeMay already ordered his, and the Air Force is running around with these guns. And this is where Cyrus Vance, okay, this is a politician, starts some stuff in Congress somewhere around 1962-63. This is when this all comes to a head. That he heard that the Army rejected this through a flawed study, rejected this weapon system. The CIA is secretly taking it to Vietnam, and there's these astounding reports and blah, 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 and we gotta have this, we gotta have that. And then turns into where Mcnamara hears about this. So Mcnamara assesses the situation, immediately orders in 1963 that they stop production of the M16 rifle. Okay, stop. You stop manufacturing today. And you're going to manufacture this, and this is what the U.S. military is going to use. Period. Go. Okay? That's how the politicians and this insane stuff, that's how this gun was adopted. This gun was more or less forced into service against what the Army and the prevailing people who ran the military thought. And politicians, the Secretary of Defense made a decision, and away it went. And that was, like I said, you got the mystery in this story about this thing tearing people to shreds, and then you get it rammed down their throat and going against the people that didn't want the thing. It's new, it's unusual, the whole concept is just overnight thrown on, and then this is where the problems all start. Now, the original AR-15, I had one. This is a A2 version. Didn't have a forward assist. I actually had one, an old Colt, years and years ago, with the triangular handguard, what they call now a pencil barrel. It was a really light gun, neat gun, okay? But it was kind of a temperamental gun. The tolerances were very close. Any dirt, any grime, people didn't understand how this worked. They're used to look at the M1 Garand, operating rod or the short piston. This used this direct impingement where the gas was tapped off inside the bolt, and the bolt, and I'll do a thing about it, has like a little internal piston, and that's what pushes it in the carrier and all this. It works, it's fine, but it's a high maintenance, sensitive weapon. You got to clean the hell out of it, you got to disassemble all of it, clean all the internal components, clean the carbon out. You have to maintain this weapon or it will not function. Also, the tolerances are tight. It's a very temperamental weapon. Now, Stoner, in what he presented to the Army, had a certain barrel twist for the bullet, okay? And it used DuPont stick powder, which to this day, if you reload these, it works great. They're one type of IMR powder. Well, when Mcnamara kind of hijacked his gun from him, and that's another thing, Stoner thought, hey, I'm going to be rich. Well, the U.S. government wanted his rifle, but the U.S. government wasn't going to make Eugene Stoner a rich man over it. And they gave him a ration of crap about it, I believe. I don't know the details, but they coerced him into doing it, okay? Then they took the design that he had and they modified it to suit their needs. First of all, they changed the powder to a ball powder. Second of all, they did something, they changed the rifling in the barrel, which did something to throw the gun off. Now they took these guns with no training, and it was now a political thing to manufacture these weapons, have them out on the front lines, which the front lines happened to be Vietnam. Okay? Real bad place to test a gun. Jungle environment, wet, nasty, okay? these guns don't function well when submerged in water. All right, that's the thing about them. And it was forced upon the troops. It was like there was no choice. You're going to use this. There was no training program set up. The Army hit with it, you know, as usual. Well, how do you clean them? They issued them with no cleaning kits. This is a high maintenance weapon and you don't have no cleaning kits. 30 caliber rods don't fit down here. You need them chamber brushes, all this other stuff. So when that happens, there was a lot of room. Well, it's self-cleaning. The Army said it's self-cleaning. And now you got problems. And a lot of the guys that were in the service and in NAM in '68 told me when all this was going on, he goes, it cost people their lives. Okay, he goes, we'd find guys out in the field that were dead with the gun broken apart. Okay. And he goes trying to fix it. So some of the vets got a real disliking for this weapon system and how it was pushed upon them, and, you know, bad feelings, and I can't blame them, okay? I heard stories of some special forces guys that said when they gave them these, he goes, every time we come back from patrol, we'd throw the damn thing in the river. We lost it. He goes, after the third one was lost, he goes, they gave me my M16 back. You know, you hear stories like that. And he told me the 20-round magazines were unreliable. So what they would do is they would load 19 rounds in the mag, and the last 2 were tracers. So he goes, when you were shooting it, you'd see a tracer, you'd still have one in the chamber, you'd throw another mag in. That's some of the stories I heard of the early use, the early 60s, of the AR15 M16 rifle, where later on and over time they straightened out the problems, but it was a disaster at first. So this gun had a really, really bad reputation and a really, really bad time in U.S. history, okay? And they added forward assist, chrome lined the chambers, I guess, figured out the ammunition problems and that, and got the gun functioning to where it worked. And then by the time I got in there, this A2 version was souped up. They made a heavier barrel. The weapon is heavier than an original Vietnam era gun. They changed the handguard. They got this shell deflector, so left-handed fellas ain't having hot brass go down their shirt and burn the piss out of them. Forward assist is standard, even though a lot of people say you don't need it, don't use it. And they adopted a 30-round magazine. Now, they asked Eugene Stoner before he passed away about this. He goes, the 20-round magazine was fine, which some people disagree, but he goes, I had to go and redesign a 30-round magazine because in Vietnam, the soldiers were running into enemy soldiers with 30-round magazines and AK-47. So he goes, that's why 30-round magazine come about. He didn't believe in it. Eugene Stoner believed that this recoil system, direct gas impingement, was the best. It simplifies the gun, makes it cheaper to manufacture, and all this other stuff. A lot of people do not. And even back, and this is where history's repeating itself again and again. Back in the 70s, there was a system of putting a gas piston in this, and you could modify your Colt rifle. There was a company that did it. Way back in the 70s, I think it was called the Rhino system. They put a piston in here. That kind of faded away for a while. Then, after 2000 and that, it became popular again. Let's put gas pistons in there. And everybody was making an AR platform with a gas piston. And for a few years, it was popular, expensive, and all the rage. And now you don't hear or see about it anymore. Then there's the cartridge. So the cartridge, hem and haw, this and that's another thing. I remember studies way back. Okay, out of this long barrel, it's cool. But if you got a 16-inch barrel, when they were making carbines, they said the 16-inch barrel, something about the loss of power of the cartridge, okay, starts making it ineffective. And it doesn't have the force and power that it should have or is required. So now they said, some studies, and this is back in the 70s, if you chop the barrels down to 16 inches, it ain't good. The 10-inch barrels and that is kind of wasteful. And then now what do we have a 14-inch barrel as a standard issue on the M4 carbine, which kind of ballistically really throws off the cartridge and everything. So you got this problem. The cartridge is unsuitable. It's too underpowered. And for years, everyone carried on about it. So over the years, there's been several attempts to chamber this weapon in something different. And here's where we go back from way back to the thing. They did a study and someone come up with something called the 6.8 Remington Special Purpose Cartridge. And basically what it is these soldiers and all these other people crunched the numbers again, and what they did is they designed a cartridge with a 115 grain bullet at 270 thousandths diameter. And I got one, I built it. I love that cartridge. That makes this weapon, to me, a lot more formidable and usable than this thing here, okay, in the 5.56. Now, this is the same old idea from back prior to World War I, you know, making a cartridge kind of in between, because, and why does it come back? Okay, just common sense. It's physics. Something about a cartridge that size and a bullet like that is just perfect for a small, lightweight, shoulder-fired weapon. Okay, and it's come up again and again. All right, that's why I believe that should be the standard military round. But of course, doing that creates a problem, because then all your guns calibered or chambered in the 5.56 become obsolete. And also, we don't take in consideration, we have forced every member of NATO to use the same ammunition and caliber that we do to have a NATO force. So if we make a radical change, half the globe has to change, okay? And that's why you don't see it happen, irregardless whether the idea is good, bad, or not. It's a total pain in the ass, all right? So that's kind of the downside. You know, I've fired them both in the, you know, guns like this. This gun is super accurate, okay, as is. I have shorter barrel ones, 16-inch, which I shoot just holes in paper, so, you know, it's accurate enough. I have these, this rifle platform in several different calibers, okay? And more about that in other videos, but getting back to this. So this is how we ended up with it. The controversy behind it, the design flaws and how to change it with gas pistons, and they've tried at different calibers. So it's all the same thing, but it's stuck around. This thing has been in service, I think, longer than any rifle in the history of the United States military. And the reason is, like I said, it's cost effective, it works, you know, if you maintain it and are disciplined enough, this gun functions flawlessly, this system, but it's just a bit of a pain in the ass. Taking it apart is easy, the pins are all captive, so you can't lose anything. Just be careful for the little cotter pin in the bolt carrier, you lose that, you're done. But it's simple to take apart. Okay, not that complicated, but it's difficult to clean it and maintain it and keep it functioning. That's another problem. Now, how this gun, I mean, in the caliber, in the 5.56 caliber, it's easy to control, it's easy to learn to shoot, that's why it's popular. Plus, the way it looks, it still has that space age look, intimidating look, okay? And this is why the gun is popular, this is why people use the gun, and also this is where it gets the bad rep, okay? It's a symbol, symbolism, okay? This is what our armed forces use, this is what the SWAT teams carry, and this and that. This is the symbol of enforcement. So it should not be let out to the general public to have something like this supposedly powerful, deadly weapon that, you know, only has a military purpose in that. You can get a 5-round magazine and go hunt with it, okay? It's just how it looks. It's the look and the psychological impact, okay? You take a flintlock musket and wave it around in that, you're not really going to scare people. You'll scare them, but not that bad. You stick a 100-round drum magazine in this thing and stand out in the open, people are going to get nervous, quick, scared the hell out of them. It's the psychological impact, okay, of what this gun does. Henceforth, that's why people fear it and you know, want it banned. Much like they wouldn't release back in the 70s the M1 Garand rifle, because you see in all the old movies and all the things of World War II, our forces attacking Europe and firing on the Japanese and the Germans. That was the symbol of our American military might. And people don't feel comfortable in just handing it out to the civilians who, you know, you doubt their judgment and responsibility. See, that's where the psychological impact comes. And that's where the M1 Garand was thought much like this gun is now. The black rifles or whatever you hear in the rhetoric. That's how opinion of just people in general and the symbolism of it, okay, has an impact on the gun and the genre or stuff behind it. So that kind of concludes my story on how we got here, mentioning all the people and the way it came in. The gun was adopted in a very turbulent time. There were a lot of problems with it in the beginning because of the way it was done. It was not done in a, you know, orderly fashion or something. It was done in this haphazard crap that nowadays has become, from back 50 years ago till now, that's just standard way we do things in this country, okay? But for all its shortcomings in that, it's still been around. I'm going to do a video on my collection of them. I still use this weapon system. I have faith in it. I believe in it, okay? It's just, it has its shortcomings and you got to work around them, but it's a good rifle. It served the military well. And I have a lot of fun shooting. So that's my take on the AR-15/M16 story.